Hello and welcome to anatomy class. I'm going to try this out. I'm going to try to take a video and go through the notes with you guys, and hopefully that will work. Um, so let's see what happens here. Um, all right. Gosh, where are the notes at? Where'd they go? All right. So as I'm pulling up the notes here, um, we obviously just took the skeletal system test, and now we are getting into the muscular system. So I wanted to go through the muscular system notes with you. Obviously, the first slide is just a title slide, and the second slide tells you the functions of muscle. So there are five functions of muscle: producing external body movements, producing internal body movements like moving things through your digestive tract or moving blood through your blood vessels, etc., stabilizing your body structures. In other words, holding things in place, keeping things steady, all that sort of stuff, storing substances. So you have muscles that store extra energy, that store, well, mostly extra energy. Moving substances, we already talked about that. That's the internal movement. And then producing heat. So, like when you shiver, that is muscles that do that. Moving on to the third slide, there are three types of muscle cells. There are cardiac muscle cells, which are that top picture on the slide there. And on that, you can see their branch. They've got these little fibers. The fibers branch out. And within those fibers, they've got intercalated discs. Intercalated discs allow the whole heart to pump as one, well, actually, as two, because there's the ventricular pump and then the atrial pump. So it pumps in two coordinated sections, and those intercalated discs help with the communication so that the heart can do that. And then you get smooth muscle, and the smooth muscle is sheet-like, and it is for coordinated contraction. So this smooth muscle is found in vessels, it's found in blood vessels, digestive tract vessels, glands, etc. And it contracts in waves. So it contracts pushing things that are within it down or up, depending on the direction. And that coordinated contraction is called peristalsis. Also, smooth muscle, like the cardiac muscle, is involuntary, meaning it acts without your conscious control. You don't push the food down your digestive tract; it happens automatically. You don't push your heart muscle, your heartbeat; that happens automatically. Your striated muscles, which are also known as skeletal muscles, because they're the ones attached to your skeleton. You'll notice on the smooth muscle here, it's got a whole bunch of fibers all kind of interconnected and woven together so that they can coordinate, just like the heart muscle has the branches so they can coordinate. The striated muscles have individual fibers, and those fibers are separate from each other. So if you're lifting something light, like a piece of paper, like ooh, I'm lifting a piece of paper, it only is taking a couple of fibers, right? If I'm lifting something heavy, which I'm not going to do because I'd probably hurt myself, then more fibers contract. So you can contract fewer or more depending on how many you need. And this is controlled by your brain. So sometimes these things can be reflexive. So if you've ever thought you were going to lift something heavy and you lift it and then it kind of fought you, it kind of like, that's because um, your brain told you it was going to be heavy and then it turned out not to be heavy. So it's voluntary, but it's still organized, I guess you could say. And then you have reflexes, which are involuntary reactions of those voluntary muscles. So as we move down to the fourth slide, you'll notice that from a from a micro level, first of all, your muscles are a bundle of fibers attached to bone by a tendon. Outside that whole muscle, you have a layer called the epimysium, which is also known as a fascia. And And that fascia attaches the muscle to the tendon. So that's this outer part here you're looking at. Within that, you've got a group of bundled fibers called and those bundles are called paramecium. Within each of those paramecium are individual muscle fibers, and each fiber is surrounded by its own endomecium. So epi, around, peri also means around, but on a smaller scale in this case. And then endo means inside. So endomecium surround individual fibers. And then within each muscle fiber, you've got filaments. You've got actin, which is the thin fibers, and you've got myosin, the thick fibers. And those filaments that include both of those are the functional unit of the muscle. And that functional unit of the muscle is called the sarcomere. And so those sarcomere is that's why it's functional. It's where the muscle contraction actually is happening. So as we go on to the next slide, how a muscle contraction works, myosin fibers have little arms or hooks. Actin fibers have chemicals that the hooks can attach to. So when those chemicals are produced, when the actin is activated, which is where the name actin comes from, then the heads of the myosin fibers are attracted to those chemicals, and the myosin fibers pull towards those, and they pull the actin fiber, and that shortens and thickens the muscle as the muscle contracts. So the reason that your skeletal muscles are striated, the reason they're striped is because when they're relaxed, then the thick fibers are a different color of red than the thin fibers. So you can actually see striping on that. So each individual fiber is all or none, meaning each fiber either contracts or it doesn't. There's no part way. So the difference between a hard muscle contraction where you're doing something difficult and a lighter muscle contraction where you're picking up a piece of paper is by how many of those fibers are actually contracting, and that's controlled by your brain based on your brain's perception of need, what you think, how much work you're going to need to actually pick something up. So moving on to the next slide, how do we know, now that we know the mechanics, how the muscle's working, how is it all fueled? How does this all work? So muscles use cellular respiration to get energy, just like every other part of the body. But they also have supplementary energy, support molecules to make respiration more efficient. So, cellular respiration requires oxygen, of course, because that's how you break down the glucose, and it requires sugar, the glucose. And muscle cells have special mechanisms to provide more of both. So, myoglobin is a special protein that only is found in muscle cells. It's the only place in the body you have it that stores extra oxygen in preparation for using the muscles heavy. So when you're out of shape, you don't have a lot of myoglobin. When your body is in shape, so like some of you guys have just started basketball, and if you let yourself get out of shape, you're sore for a few days when you're first starting basketball. But as you get in shape, that myoglobin is being produced, and then you can store that extra oxygen so that your body can keep up, so that when you're working those muscles hard in a basketball game, the muscles can actually keep up with that heavier load. This allows you to go longer before you have to start breathing heavier to bring in extra oxygen. And then there's creatine. You guys probably have heard of creatine in protein shakes or things like that. Creatine phosphate, that's actually chemically what it is a protein molecule that makes ATP last longer once it's produced. So this supplements ATP and allows it to give you more energy. Creatine phosphate is produced in the liver, and it's sent out to the muscle cells that the body thinks are going to undergo heavy workload. So again, once you're in shape, you've got that creatine in the muscle cells that the liver has produced. If the body's always monitoring these things, it's always monitoring this stuff. So if you're taking creatine but you're not using it, you're not using those muscles enough, your body is going to tell liver, okay, we don't need as much, and it's not going to make as much. So taking creatine artificially sometimes can slow down the liver, or sometimes it just um, isn't used efficiently. Okay. So if the muscle in the cell doesn't have enough oxygen, or if it's lacking sugar, it may have to use fermentation, and that produces lactic acid, which causes a soreness of being out of shape. And then the lactic acid has to be pumped out. This is why, by the way, it's better when you are sore from muscle use to do light exercise rather than just do nothing because it hurts, because a light exercise will pump out that lactic acid. So if you're not adding more oxygen deficit and creating more lactic acid from fermentation, it actually pushes the lactic acid out of the muscle. So this is why cooling down after a race, or stretching or jogging lightly after a hard workout is beneficial to you, even though most people don't really feel like doing that. All right, moving on to the next slide, how the muscle produces movement. So you have two ends of your muscle. You have the origin, which is the end of the muscle attached to the stationary bone during a movement, and you got the insertion, which is the end of the muscle attached to a moving bone during movement. So, for example, the quadricep, the vastus lateralis, the big quadricep muscle in the front, the origin is attached up here to the pelvic bone by the proximal quadricep tendon, and then the insertion is attached down to the patella. That's the distal quadricep tendon, and that's the one that I tore, and why I'm not at school right now. And the insertion is the one that allows the movement, which is why I couldn't move my leg properly when I tore that. So the muscle pulls on the insertion end of the muscle, and that moves the attached bone, and that creates the movement. So most muscles work in groups. The prime mover is the main muscle that moves for a particular movement. Synergists are muscles that support that movement. So even though the vastus medialis, whatever, I'm messing that up, the big quadricep muscle is the prime mover, there are muscles around it that are supporting that movement. They support whether they do part of the movement or whether they just move supplementally. They're involved. The antagonist flexes to return the muscle back to its original position. So if the quadricep is flexing to, actually, got the other way around. The hamstring is, let's just do the arm. The bicep is flexing to raise the lower arm, the radius and ulna. The tricep is the antagonist. That is flexing to return it back to its length state. I don't know if you guys can see that on the camera or not, but when the bicep flex, that moves the lower arm up. Then when the antagonist, the tricep flex, that moves the arm back down. So there's always one muscle going one way and a different muscle going the other. Your fingers have that, your toes have that, your legs, your arms. Most muscles work in pairs. So the prime mover and the antagonist are opposite movements of each other. Synergists support the prime mover. And then you've got muscles that have nothing to do with movement. They're fixators. Their purpose is to stabilize the bone. So this is, if any of you guys on the leg have ever had aches around the hip and stuff, that's the IT band. The IT band wraps around the leg and stabilizes those upper leg muscles, stabilizes that bone so that when they move, they're moving it more effectively. All right. So that's kind of all the technical stuff about the muscular system. Now we're going to move down and we're going to actually get to the anatomy of the muscular system. So as we look at the little dudes here on the picture, you've got a front view picture and a rear view picture. You're not going to have to know all of these, okay? You're going to have to know some of these. So We're going to skip the ones in the face because we'll get to those later when we get that muscle of the head slide. So let's go down to deltoid. Deltoid is the first one, so you might want to have a highlighter or something on this. But on the front and back picture of the whole dude, you're going to want to highlight these particular muscles. Deltoid is the muscle that goes over the shoulder, so that is this muscle. The bicep brachii is the arm muscle that flexes the arm. The pectoralis is the chest muscles. The rectus abdominis, if you have a six-pack, which I have a well-insulated six-pack here, that is the rectus abdominis. The external obliques are the ab muscles that are on the side. This is why you do crossing crunches instead of just up and down crunches. Torque those. The quadricep group is the several muscles on the front of the leg, and when we see the leg up closer, we'll get into the details of that. The sartorius is the muscle that wraps around the leg. So as you look at these legs, you see on each leg there's one that starts out at the outer hip and then wraps across to the inside of the knee. That's a sartorius. That's a stabilizing muscle. And then you got the patellar tendon, which is the one that wraps over the kneecap. And then you got the tibialis anterior, which is the muscle that is on either side of your shin bone, of your tibia. All right. So from deltoid to tibius anterior, those 9 muscles are the ones you need to be able to identify on the front picture. So not too bad, right? In the rear view, don't worry about the occipitalis. That'll be in the head picture. Trapezius is this big triangular muscle in the back. So it kind of goes up. It makes like a diamond shape, kind of like a kite in the upper back area. Then you got the deltoid, of course, it's on the shoulder. You should be able to identify that on the back as well as the front. The triceps brachii, which are the muscles on the back of your arms, so these muscles back here. The latissimus dorsi, which is big wing-looking muscles that take up the bulk of your back, and then you've got all this tendon material in the middle of your back that attaches to the spine. The gluteus medius, which is this little triangular muscle on either side of your buttocks, as you can say it, I suppose. Then the gluteus maximus, which I'm sure you all know what that is. And then all these back of the leg muscles are called the hamstring group, as they're together. And then the gastrocnemius are the paired calf muscles back here on the lower leg. And then the Achilles tendon is the one that attaches from those gastrocnemius down and over the calcaneus, the heel bone. All right. So now we're ready to go on to the next. Oh, I just lost it. Just a sec. We're ready to go on to the next picture of muscle. And these are the muscles of the head. So the frontalis, or also known as epicranius frontalis, are the muscles that come down from over your frontal bone to the front of your face. Then the orbiculus oculi are the muscles that surround your eye. The orbiculus oris are the ones that surround your mouth. You have the nasalis muscle, which crosses over your nose. You've got the sternocleidomastoid, which are the nice thick muscles on the neck there, on the outside, actually inside, both sides of your neck. The masseter, which is kind of hiding there. It's kind of this little L-shaped muscle on the side of the head. You can't really see it from the front. And the masseter is the one that pulls your jaw closed. You've got zygomatus major and zygomatus minor. The major is actually below the minor. The minor is shorter, that's why it's minor. It goes from behind the eye down to the top of the lip, like when you have a sneer, like, yeah, you guys probably aren't old enough to remember Billy Idol. But Billy Idol's sneer, that was the zygomatus minor that made him sneer like that. And then the zygomatus major is longer and a little lower. And that one also lifts the corner of the lips. You have the buccinator. The buccinator is this little one that goes from the edges of the lips back behind the masseter and attaches back below the ear. The platysma, which goes around the front of your neck, and then of course the orbiculus oris. So all the ones listed on this muscle of the head list, those will be the ones you'll be identifying on the front and side view of that. Again, so those are listed on the overall body, but you can ignore them on that. You only need to know the ones in the arms, legs, and torso. So we have the close-up of the arms. That's the next muscle slide. Of course, you can see the deltoid and the pectoral muscles and all this, and the trapezius even. As you're looking at the front, the brachialis is a hard one to see because it kind of wraps, kind of like the sartorius does on the leg. The brachialis wraps around behind the shoulder, comes around, and then attaches to the gosh, I'm forgetting. I think it attaches on the ulna side rather than the radius side, but I could be wrong about that. But it's a stabilizing muscle. So the brachialis is a wraparound stabilizing muscle. The biceps is the actual flexing muscle. And then you've got the flexor carpi, which flex your wrist. So your wrist is flexed. So I don't know if you can see this or not, but when your flexes wrist, that's flexor carpi. You've also got the flexor digitorum, which are how you flex your fingers. So when you feel on the inside of your wrist here, I don't know if you can see this or not. When you flex your fingers, you can feel that. When you flex your wrist, you feel it moving in different places because you got both. So the flexor muscles of the finger are more inside, and the flexor of the wrist are more outside. So I don't really expect you to be able to tell all those apart. Just know that within this forearm, you've got flexor carpi and flexor digitorum. Okay, on the back of the arm, you've got, of course, your triceps, and then you've got the extensor carpi. That's how you extend your wrist. You can feel that on the back when you go back with your wrist. I don't know if you can see that. I can't really tell where the camera is because I'm looking at the notes while I'm talking to you guys. As you extend back the wrist, you can kind of feel that up in here. And then under that, you've got extensor digitorum that as you extend your fingers, you can feel that straighten back there. And again, I don't expect you to be able to identify exactly which one's which, the extensor carpi or the extensor digitorum. Just know their purpose. If the extensor muscles extend your fingers or extend your wrist, extend your fingers or extend your wrist. The flexors flex your fingers or flex your wrist. All right. Also, you'll notice on this close-up of the arm, you've got the teres minor and the teres major. These are the kind of the muscles that are underneath your armpit. And these are muscles for crossing your arm over. The pectoral muscles are the ones to lift things. The teres muscles are the ones to cross over. They're kind of hidden underneath the pectoral muscles. On the arm picture, you can see that, and just like with the one on the mouth earlier, teres minor is smaller but above the teres major, and teres major is the larger one, and even though it's below, it's considered major. All right. So for the arm, again, you're going to want to know on the front of the arm, biceps, brachialis, which will be on either side of the biceps wrapping around. And then you want to know the flexor muscles are on the front view of the arm, both flexor digitorum and flexor carpi. On the back, you've got the triceps, and you've got the extensor digitorum and the extensor carpi. And then you've got the teres muscles hiding there underneath your trapezius and latissimus dorsi. You'll see those more on the back view there, even though they're under the because they're hiding under the pectoral muscles. And that's the teres minor on top and the teres major on the bottom. So those are your arm muscles. Those are the ones I want you to know. On the legs, you've got the sartorius, as I mentioned. So we're looking at the front view first. The sartorius is that one that wraps around. You've got in the quadricep tells you there's 4 muscles, and there are. The big muscle is the rectus femoris. That's the one right in the middle that attaches to the patella. So that is the prime mover, right? And then on the outside of the rectus femoris, you've got the vastus lateralis. And then on the inside of the rectus femoris, you got the vastus medialis. And then you've got adductor longus and adductor magnus. Honestly, I can never tell those two apart. So just know those muscles on the inside of the leg. When somebody pulls their groin, that's usually what they pull, is one of those adductor muscles. And so the inside, when you look at this leg muscle, you see the sartorius wrapping around. To the medial end of the sartorius, that's where you're going to see those adductor muscles, the adductor longus and the adductor magnus. And you don't have to separate those. Just know those are the adductors, okay? And then the very inside of the leg is the gracialis. So the gracialis is like the very inside of the leg there. And you can see that both front and back. And again, on the leg, don't worry about the extensors and the flexors and all that. Those are too hard to see. Just know the tibius anterior is the one that surrounds each side of the tibia bone. And then on the back view, the gastrocnemius are the calf muscles that attach to the Achilles tendon. So speaking of the back view, again on the inside you got the gracialis. And then on the inside of, or the outside of that, you've got the adductor. I think the adductor you see from the back is more the adductor magnus, but again, you don't have to separate those out. The muscle, that long and narrow muscle in the middle of the back of the leg, that's a semitendinosus. That is usually when somebody pulls their hamstring, that's the one that gets pulled. That's the one that's under the most pressure. And that kind of wraps around the inside of the leg. And then the bicep femoris is by far the largest muscle in the back. Just like your bicep flexes your arm, your bicep femoris flexes your leg. So I can't actually do that, but when you curl your leg, when you're laying down, you do a leg curl, or when you curl your leg to sit down or whatever, that's the muscle that is the prime mover in the back. So the prime mover in the front's the rectus femoris. The prime mover in the back is the bicep femoris. And then, of course, we got the gastrocnemius. I already talked about that. So the last slide is muscles of the trunk. And this shows you a whole bunch of muscles under muscles under muscles. You don't have to know all those. As I had mentioned before, I want you to know the teres minor and the teres major. And again, the teres minor is above the teres major. And then I want you to know the ones that are directly over the ribs are the serratus muscles. So you have serratus anterior and serratus anterior or posterior, but you don't have to separate those out. So those are over the rib muscles are called the serratus muscles. And then the between the ribs muscles, which you don't see at all in this picture, are the intercostal muscles. Inter meaning between and costal meaning ribs. So the only extra muscles on that last picture that I want you to know, don't worry about the rhomboidus. Those are under the pectorals, under the trapezius. They're really hard to see. Just know the serrator muscles are the ones directly over the ribs. Know the teres minor and know the teres major. All right? So hopefully that made sense. This is weird doing notes on a video rather than seeing you guys' confused looks on your faces. So hopefully you got it. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And, I'm sorry if I moved around and you couldn't see what I was talking about a whole lot, but I hope this helps. And so enjoy the muscles, they are groovy. And if you have questions, you can text me. I didn't put my number on the board. Um, so if you I will put that in the lesson plans. I'll have the sub put my number on the board if you have questions. All right. So that is the end of the muscle notes. I hope you got something out of this.